Good evening, everyone. Welcome to this month's Scrutiny Panel meeting. The fire alarm procedures are: if the fire alarm is activated, please vacate down the offices, down the main staircase opposite the lifts in the foyer, assemble in Hawley Square on the green, and officers will assist you and advise you when it's deemed safe to return to the chamber. Would everyone present please ensure that their mobile phones are turned to silent and they are not used to make or receive phone calls whilst this meeting is in progress. Please note that this meeting is being live streamed for members of the public, and this meeting will also be recorded and will subsequently be broadcast on the internet. Does anyone intend to film the meeting? And that's a no. Okay, moving on. I've had one request to speak under 20.1, and that's Councillor Rees-Pugh. And public speaking, I've had two requests for public speaking on item 8, and that's Mr. Solly and Miss Brown. Anybody else in the public gallery who wish to speak? No? Okay. Moving on to agenda item number 1. Apologies for absence. I've got Councillor Britcher being replaced by Councillor Donaldson and Councillor Faruqi being replaced by Councillor Huxley. Any further apologies? No? Okay. Item number 2, declarations of interest. Are there any declarations of interest? Councillor Pope.
I work for Social Enterprise Kent, who were interviewed as part of the grant funding scrutiny review report.
Thank you. Okay, moving on to item 3, the minutes of the previous meeting. To approve the minutes of the Overview and Scrutiny Panel meeting held on the 15th of October, a copy is attached to the agenda pack. Can I have a proposer, please? Councillor Curry, and a seconder? Councillor Packman, thank you. All members agree? Thank you. Okay, moving on to item number 4, the Cabinet presentation on an overview of what TDC initiatives were for youth services provision in Thanet. We've requested this evening, obviously, because we've got our new scrutiny review to be undertaken very shortly. So we've asked Councillor Keane to come and make a presentation. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for inviting me. Now, I did come along to the Overview and Scrutiny Panel, I don't know, about 6 months back or something. So a lot of the information about what we're doing is the same because we're still doing it. But I think it's good to recap on those initiatives so we don't forget them. But also I think there's lots else we can talk about and lots new happening that we need to be thinking about in the future. So I think this is a great opportunity to do that. So, as I say, some of this information will be familiar to you, but it is worth going over again. So we've got the knife crime awareness programme and the knife sculpture that I'll talk about, the park life events that we run twice a year, the ladder of risk work that we do in schools, Thanet Youth Council and the Ellington Park Youth Cafe, and that's not an exhausted list, but it's some of the main things that we do. So for the knife crime awareness, obviously knife crime's a national issue, and we've certainly had problems with it locally, but I think we've been very proactive in the sorts of initiatives we've put in place to tackle this. So we do a lot of work in schools around knife crime so that young people understand knife crime and the law, but also that they can look at the ladder of risk and look at how they can keep themselves safe and what things they can do to avoid dangerous situations. So, I mean, this has been hugely successful, and since it started in the summer of 2023, the programme's been delivered to over 1,033 young people within 9 different schools and colleges. And so, as I say, that's a huge piece of work that we do and very positive. Alongside that, we've also done the knife amnesty, so you'll probably all be familiar now with knife amnesty bins throughout the area, and these are put in places where, you know, we think they'll get the most use as well. And again, it's been a huge number of knives that have been collected through this, and there's just a selection of some of them on that picture. One of the things that I think is really innovative is that we've got a knife crime sculpture project. So with all the knives that we've collected, They've obviously all been cleaned up and that, but what's going to happen is there's going to be a sculpture, a large sculpture made using the knives, which will then be taken around the area as a teaching tool, sort of making the point about knives and safety. And the final design has been chosen now, but it's all under wraps until it's ready. Work will begin on it around about Christmas time, and we're anticipating that it'll be ready in Easter time next year. So that will be something that you'll see in the area or will have publicity for. So that's just saying about that. So then one of the things that we do have, which again I spoke about last time, is Thanet Youth Council, which was established in November 2022, and it's gone. Not the Youth Council, the Youth Council's still there. But this is something where we really wanted to give young people their own voice, to hear from them what their issues were and get them involved in problem solving them as well. There we go. Hang on, we're back. And so, as I say, this has been going for a couple of years now, and it is very successful. I think one of the most difficult things is that it has a fairly small membership, and one of the problems is it's for any young person in the school years 7 to 13, but because of that, obviously, it tends to be the older ones that are most engaged, and then they go off to college or work or somewhere else, university, and we lose them. So we're constantly needing to re-recruit. Those that we do have are very committed and very positive about it, but it would be nice to build up greater numbers, and certainly it's something that we try and publicise through all the TDC channels, but it's something I think we need to do more work on to carry on building on that. One of the things that the young people have identified as a priority for them is keeping Thanet a safe place, particularly for young people. And we have been able to help them take issues forward, like they flagged up that some of the lights in Dane Park weren't working, and I hope they've been fixed now. They've certainly been reported, and so it's nice for the young people to see that when they raise issues, action gets taken to put them right. So, as I say, that was one of the things that they identified, and we're very pleased that we could help them take that forward. They're also represented on the IAG, can't remember what it stands for, it's the police meeting. No, I can't remember what it stands for. Anyway, it's the police meeting, and so Ian Swallow comes along and talks about crime in the area, and again, it's really good because they are quite vocal, speaking up for what independent advisory group for the police, but they're very good at speaking up about the issues they're finding, so that they've got that direct communication with the police about it. They've designed their own logo, so again, this was something they did, and sort of we've also worked with them on increasing the media reach through social media channels. We've got the Park Life Community Hub, and so that's a initiative that's held in parks twice a year, and the idea is it's for people aged 11 to 25 to come along. There's a variety of different stalls. The Youth Council have their own stall there, but they can go and they can find out about sort of different services there are that can help them. They also have sort of sports clubs and things like that are there, so they can find out activities they could join in with, and as I say, they have their own stall so that they can tell people about the Youth Council as well. And then another initiative is the Ellington Park Youth Cafe. Ellington Park, or Friends of Ellington Park, do a whole host of activities aimed at all different age groups, but it's good that they've also included, you know, our young people in initiatives that they're doing, so that it gives them a safe space to hang out and sort of to build sort of their confidence and that, make friends with people. So it's been very successful so far, and I don't know if it's going forward. Perhaps it is going forward, so that's good to hear. The ladder of risk, which I mentioned earlier, is an interactive activity where it's the mat, and children are given cards prompting them to think about different behaviours and how risky they think they are, how they think they can, you know, manage them, how they can keep themselves safe. So it's a really good tool, and it's really good to get the young people talking about how they feel about things, rather than just us identifying what we think are the risky behaviours. There's lots of initiatives that we do that aren't an ongoing thing, but things like Thanet Games, which we ran this summer and is hoped to be a yearly event in future. It was really about getting everybody more active, so it was for all age groups, from very young children through teenage children to families and parents and that. So we know that activity has many benefits, and it's often something as children get older, as they come into their teenage years, that they might drop out of. So it's trying to engage them still in that kind of activity. We were also able to refurbish the pickleball courts, and that's something that, you know, is free, again, for any age, but young people particularly enjoy that game, so that's good. And safety in action, I don't know about. What? No. Oh, never mind. There's a next slide for it. It's an interactive safety awareness week. It runs in March every year, usually held at Dreamland. And again, this is particularly for Year 6 students transitioning to secondary schools, so that they can look at what might be worrying them about making that transition. They can discuss the issues and help, again, young people to keep them safe. Pickleball courts we've said about. Thanet Games I've also said about, and as I say, it is something we want to repeat yearly, and particularly with Olympic years, to make a bigger event from it. Youth provision outside of Thanet District Council. Obviously, the first thing we've got on here is the pie factory, which is, a bit of a sore point really at the moment, because obviously that's under threat with the funding cuts from Kent County Council. We are trying to look at how we can support them and take this forward, but we do also have to be realistic about, how we finance things. So we certainly recognise the importance of it, and we are certainly looking how we can support it going forward. They also, at the Pie Factory, as well as their music and arts activities, they do a bike project, which again ties in with the activity for young people, and so that's something we would also like to look at continuing. Sports Connect, back to this whole thing about activity, which we know has a huge positive impact on mental health and well-being, and we want to really focus on that for young people and make it possible for them to join in with things. And we've also got to think about the young people that have, maybe for one reason or another aren't going to school, and make sure they're linked into community activities as well. Like with the young people, the worry a lot of them have is about safety, and so there is programs to help them look at how they can reduce their risk and the support they need to do this. One of the things we're also looking at is particularly violence against women and girls, and how we make sure that young women have the skills they need and the confidence to keep themselves safe. And along that, we had Active Thanet did self-defence for women and girls earlier in the year. So sort of there's also Thanet Girls Can that did the bike rides and that. So there's lots of activities particularly focusing on women and girls to make sure that they can also join in sports, because again it's something particularly older girls tend to drop out of. Park life continues. Thanet Youth Council, I say, looking to grow in numbers. So for any of you that have, sort of Facebook groups or that as a councillor, or any other places where you can sort of publicise it, Thanet Council already uses all their channels to publicise it, and for all the activities that we do for young people, any way you can help in passing on that information to reach as many young people as possible will be a great help. I said about the knife sculpture, Thanet Games, pickleball courts, matter of risk. Right, okay, so that's the end of the presentation. You will get the slides. So as I say, I wanted to sort of whistle-stop tour through it really, because a lot of the information is the same information I gave you last time. But I also wanted to sort of flag up some new things, and some things that obviously you'll be thinking about in this group that you're planning to take forward. The YMCA this year found that expenditure on youth services have been cut by 73% since 2011. So it shows what we're up against when that much funding has been reduced, and obviously this is something that we're feeling locally. We are looking at how we can invest in things. Obviously, as part of our coastal wellbeing, we've got the skate park, which will be sort of being developed over the next year and a half, which we hope will be a real sort of spot where young people can come together, and it will be a community focus as well. So that's going to be a very positive thing. There's lots of initiatives that run at various different times through Sports Connect and Sport England. And Sport England have, as particular focal areas, low-income families, girls aged 5 to 16, and children in care, to name just a few. But obviously we look at what funding comes up through those kind of streams to support that. The Arts Education Exchange has done a lot of work locally with young people and creative arts activities. Like so many things these days, they're also fundraising at the moment to carry on their work, but they certainly look at creative opportunities for young people and networking around that. Obviously, there's Margate and Ramsgate football clubs. They do a lot of work for young people. Now, obviously, from the old Quarterdeck Centre, it's now the North Down Road Family Hub. And so although it has cut down on the number of young people activities that it's doing, because it's now a whole full age range, they still do sports activities and things like street football from there, so that's something worth bearing in mind. I think the most positive thing is that the government have just announced the National Youth Strategy, and they will be seeking the views of young people to look at this, and it's certainly something we'll be keeping a look, on, so that we can look if there's funding available, that we can take that forward and make the most of that. So, as I say, that's just something to be aware of. I think that's probably all I've got to say, but I'm happy to take any questions or comments if you have any. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Keane. Excellent presentation. Members, Councillor Wing.
Thank you, Councillor Keane, and thank you for everybody involved as well. Young people are a bit of a passion of mine. Do we have any particular groups where we focus on the various young people who have protected characteristics, minority groups within our communities? And the knife sculpture sounds like a brilliant, absolutely fabulous idea. Will it do a tour of the towns and the villages to be used as an educational tool, so that I'm hoping it won't just sit in one place. It will go round and maybe do a tour of the schools and youth clubs as an educational tool.
Yes, I think that's the idea. I don't know, I'd hand over to anyone else here that does, about the sort of protected characteristics in particular. I know that's something when they're looking at the youth strategy as a national thing that has been raised, but I don't know locally.
So obviously we don't provide youth provision, we tend to put things in to tackle issues in different areas, so it doesn't tend to be specific to any sort of protected characteristics. It tends to be generally for what the issue is and how we can help resolve that, but it's something we can take forward.
Councillor Austin.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks, Councillor Keane. That was really interesting. Obviously, we know that youth clubs and youth provision makes a difference. It makes a difference in the short term and it makes a difference in the long term. I've had discussions with the pie factory people about the report that came out in the Times. I think we got a digest of it in one of the LGRU things about closure of youth clubs has detrimental effects on teenagers' GCSE performance, and the more deprived backgrounds they come from, the worse the results are. So obviously I'm pleased that we're supporting people like Pie Factory in the struggle that they have, and trying to use our resources to put extra help in where we can, and I do hope we can carry on doing that, and that the work of the group that Councillor Bright is leading will help us to focus on that. I wanted to ask what you were saying about us sharing information as councillors, and we'd be really keen to do that. We don't always hear about stuff when it's happening, events, park life, those kinds of things. We don't always get the information until it's out there. Can we establish a principle whereby information comes through to councillors first, so that we know what the youth council is doing, what's happening with park life, what's happening with community safety and so on? It would be really helpful if we could get that information first, and we could be helping to share it. There's all sorts of things we could be doing if we only knew what was going on. Thank you.
So following the PSPO conversation where you raised the same issues, Councillor Austin, we have been doing that in terms of getting it out as soon as we can.
Councillor Green.
Yeah, thank you for the presentation. Obviously in Ramsgate we were very concerned about Pie Factory, and I was pleased that you said that you are engaged with them, but I was hoping for something a bit more positive. In what way are you engaged with them?
I mean, I don't think I can say too much at the moment. We are looking with them at what the opportunities would be for them to be able to continue. But as I say, obviously there's lots of discussions taking place, and so I don't think I can say more at the moment.
Councillor Cupp.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the presentation. Just a quick question on, when the Youth Council was set up, it was with a £1,000 budget for potential projects that were going on. Firstly, is that still the case? And then secondly, is there any conversations happening in regards to the budget next year on increasing that budget for them so they can potentially do bigger projects moving forward? Thank you.
The £1,000 is still there and there's no plans to change that. It hasn't been discussed to increase it because it hasn't been spent yet, but it would be something that we'd be looking at as we hopefully grow the Youth Council, that maybe in the future we would need to provide them with more funding.
Councillor Bright.
Thank you. And thank you, Councillor Keane, for the report. I just also wanted to mention the Pavilion Youth Cafe in my ward, and I just wondered how far you kind of engage with them as well. It's really good to see the Thanet Youth Council are they really want more safe spaces, and what kind of work are we going to be doing with them to ensure that we do provide more safe spaces in Thanet? Also, how are we involving young people, not just the Youth Council, but places like Pavilion Youth Cafe and Pie Factory and schools in the design and planning of new facilities like the skate park, and any new parks, any recreation spaces, basically. Also, another thing that I've recently spoken to the Open Spaces team about, the possibility of possibly including outdoor gym equipment for older kids to use. Whether we've got any plans to do that as a council, or whether we could also, if we do have plans to do that, whether we can speak to young people and young people's groups to find out actually what they want before we provide things like that. Thank you.
Yes, I mean, I think the officers might want to come in on this as well, but obviously it's very important and we do want to hear young people's voices. Not always easy to get, because, say, we've got sort of small groups like the Youth Council, but it's how you get the message out wider than that. And certainly with things like the skate park, they have worked hard to get the views of young people that will be using that. So I think it's possible. I think we just have to keep finding ways to actually engage more young people in telling us what they want. I say pass over to the officers in case you've got anything to add.
I can just add in briefly that when we do our surveys, we do put them in specifically out to schools. So when we do our yearly how safe do you feel survey, for want of a better description, that goes out to all schools, and all the interactions we have. So we may be there talking about knife crime, but we're also gauging opinions and talking to them about other things and working it in. We don't have a set forum for going out and speaking to everybody about every decision that's made, but some of my colleagues do bring things to the Youth Council for their opinions on what they're planning going forward. And Mike's just going to talk about open spaces.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor. I think in terms of open spaces and gym equipment, as opposed to play areas and play equipment specifically, we've got, I think, 33 play areas around the district, and obviously we have to balance the new provision with the cost of maintaining existing and the budgets available for that. Where there is scope to put in new equipment, I think absolutely we would want to engage with the local community, engage with sort of town councils around the possibility of funding and things like that. So I think, where there aren't any plans, I don't think at the moment currently to install gym equipment specifically, but absolutely it would be with engagement with the town councils, with the youth community to do that.
Thank you. So just on engaging with young people in schools, I think the best way to do that is to work with counsellors. At the moment, on the town council, I'm the schools liaison council, which is a position that we've created at the Broadstairs Town Council, and it means that my responsibility is to go into schools and liaise with schools, and it works very well. So I would encourage Ramsgate Town Council to do that as well. It's been really successful. It's good to have someone that is doing that liaison, so that when it comes to us needing to find people's views, you've got someone that's got an in and knows who the people to talk to. Thank you.
So did you want to come in on that point?
It was just a point of information, really, that at the War Recreation Ground in Ramsgate, the Ramsgate Skate Park Project group, which is a voluntary group, has been raising money to refurbish the basketball court, and the next stage of our plan is to install adult gym equipment. And we have a survey of 300 and something young people that we did a couple of years ago, which we can feed into your group, Councillor Bright, with any information that might be useful.
Excellent. Councillor Davis.
Thank you, Chair. Again, there's some very good and interesting information. From what you're saying, Councillor Keane, there seems to be a bit of a cliff that is reached through the Youth Council, and this is, I think, a really important bit of engagement, because we had them in here a few meetings ago, actually, and it was a privilege. Because of that natural turnover every year, they're maturing, it's going to be a self-perpetuating and self-renewing thing, hopefully. But given that those young people are engaged and are committed to be engaged whilst they're on the Youth Council, from what you're saying, there's a need for something to bridge the gap as they move into society and maybe go to work or study or whatever, that maintains that engagement and feeling of empowerment that it gives them. So maybe we as a council need to look at a way of maintaining that motivation so that then they become more productive members of society. Perhaps some sort of collaboration with community groups, with interests that those young people identify, could just give some sort of formal activity, because activity leads to outcome. As I say, it seems to me that it's a wonderful idea, and then come leaving school, oh well, see you later. So just something maybe we could look at. I'd also like to, doesn't happen that often, but I'm going to agree with Councillor Bright very much about the schools outreach and things. Penny, you mentioned about when you engage with them regularly. Perhaps when those engagement events take place, the ward councillors for wherever that school is could be notified and be part of that process as well, because that will help maintain, I think, a team approach to things, and it just helps educate people the more engaged they are. And interestingly enough, also, very good what you said about identifying what the young people want. I was having a conversation earlier today with the chair of Cliffs End Parish Council, who, in the absence of schools in that ward, or in that end of the ward, has been engaging with a youth club at the village hall down there and things, and over a period of some weeks built a picture of what those youngsters want to see, and that's helped identify some the final details of a 106 funded project in the playground there. So that outreach and finding and it wasn't what was originally going to go in there. So it's important, I think, that young people are empowered with that voice, because we all sit here saying we're doing it for you. We are, but let's enable them and let them do it for themselves, because I think that's an important step forward, and also brings fresh blood into the chamber, of course, eventually. Thank you, Chair.
Further questions?
Sorry, can I just come back on
Councillor
that? Just to say some very interesting points there, so I think we'll sort of take them away and look at how we might develop them. Certainly I know sort of TDC are looking at apprenticeships, and you know, it's something we need to be looking at more widely to support young people in that. Certainly from some of the young people that are in the Youth Council, they're really, not surprisingly, but interested in local politics, and again it's something I'd like to build on as to how we can get them more involved with that. They have come to various different meetings and observed them and that, so that's interesting to see, and I'd like to sort of build on that for them. I think the whole thing about how we take that forward for their future development post Youth Council is a very interesting point. Thank you.
Thank you. Members, any further questions? We're all done? Okay, excellent. I mean, which obviously a subject we're going to come back to over the next few months with Councillor Bright's review. So, excellent. Thank you. Right, moving on. Item number 5, the review. We've moved this item up the agenda because we felt that it was always pinned on the end and you were all too tired to think about what we want to do after 3 hours. So we moved it up a little bit. So we're going to do a review of the Overview and Scrutiny Work Panel Programme for 2024-25. Obviously, the Youth Services Working Party is meeting this week, so we should have some more update on that in December, unless you want to say something about it now, Joan?
No, I've got nothing to say other than, yes, we're meeting on Thursday afternoon. Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, excellent. I mean, obviously, there's plenty of experience here. I mean, Councillor Curry, Councillor Bridger, myself and Councillor Austin have all done led scrutiny reviews, so if you need any help, there's plenty of help there. I was going to say, yeah, obviously December, we've got a councillor presentation, cabinet presentation from Councillor Bright on the parking strategy. January, I think the idea was to, Councillor Keane has gone, to invite her back, wasn't it, Councillor Green? She's gone, yeah, to talk about poverty in Thanet, because of the next scrutiny review, I think we're going to look at the cost of living crisis in Thanet and what this council is doing there, so that's a precursor to that. I'll come back to Councillor Austin's scrutiny review because you've got your own item in the agenda, so we'll come back to that. February, we were going to do something about biodiversity, I think. I don't know if you want a cabinet presentation on that or you want to go for, because that was your idea, I think, wasn't it? Biodiversity. I don't know who suggested that. Can't remember that one. And then there was another one looking at business practices in TDC, such as homeworking and management, things like that. I don't know how we want to look at that.
We could have a presentation
from the Chief Exec. Yeah, we could do. Okay, we can put that in for February. If we can ask Colin to come along to that or invite him to come to. Is there anything else anybody wants to discuss about the work programme, Councillor Scobie?
It's a question, Chair. I'm not still getting my head round scrutiny as opposed to other committees. What role do we have in budget process and sort of tracking the budget? I know the Cabinet regular reports come here for review, but do we have any voice or role in the budget and how it's prepared or anything?
Yes, so the budget forms part of the budget and policy framework, and so as such the draft budget will come to this panel before it goes on to Cabinet. So the process essentially is Cabinet agree what they think the budget should be, comes to ONS, OSP can then review it, look at it, ask questions of Cabinet members. They then make any recommendations they wish to make back to Cabinet, spend more money on X, spend less money on Y, those sorts of things. And then that then gets forwarded on to full council for a final decision.
Councillor Austin?
I just want to point out the item under 3.4D, events, what TDC can do to improve its service to voluntary events organisers. We have dealt with to some degree in the other report, but I'm sure it could benefit from a Cabinet presentation perhaps at some future stage.
Okay, so any further questions or are we going to move on? Okay, moving on to item number 6, the evaluation of the retention or disposal options of housing revenue account units. Call on Ashley Jackson.
Thank you. We have worked in partnership with the tenant and leasehold team to present this report to you. It outlines the ownership and the refurbishment options for the following properties: 37 Heaston Road, Ramsgate, Flat 3 Cobb Court, 27 King Street, Margate, and 1 Park Lodge, Montefiore Avenue. All 3 residential dwellings are currently owned by the council. This report examines both the costs of refurbishing the properties and the potential capital receipts from their disposal at auction. The recommendation is to dispose of these properties and reinvest the proceeds of the sales into the council's housing revenue account capital programme to purchase homes that are more suitable for households on the housing register. The total estimated cost of the essential maintenance requirements...
Sorry, I can't help with that?
Sorry, I don't know what's going on with my watch. I'm just going to take that off. Siri doesn't like it. The total estimated cost of the essential maintenance required based on the higher end of the quoted range for all properties is £291,665. Independent valuation reports provided current market valuations for each property. 37 Hearson Road, Ramsgate, valued at 102,500. Flat 3 Cobb Court, 27 King Street, Margate, and the freehold for 27 King Street, 328,000. And 1 Park Lodge, Montefiore Avenue, Ramsgate, and the freehold for flats 1, 2, and 3 Park Lodge, 201,000. In total, if each property and the associated freehold where applicable was sold at its valuation, it would generate 632,000. The homes in question will never achieve a required EPC rating due to their age and original construction. 1 Park Lodge and 3 Cobb Court, 27 King Street are both below the EPC Band C minimum we would want for properties within our housing stock. Both are Grade 2 listed and would be very difficult and expensive if possible at all. The investment required to get these homes to a suitable environmental standard would be 250,000, disproportionate to the amount we would spend on other properties through the voids and plan maintenance programme. This is the reason why the properties have been empty since they were vacated. Listed buildings cost more to maintain as parts and materials and labour costs more, and specifically 1 Park Lodge and 3 Cobb Court, both Grade 2 listed. Park Lodge needs considerable external works, windows and repointing, which would be more costly due to their listed status. 2 of the homes in question are the last properties in a block that are now all leaseholders, and managing multiple tenures in a block is trickier for the tenant and leasehold service team. Cobb Court and Park Lodge are both part of blocks that the council no longer wholly owns. Thank you.
Thanks, Ashley. Cheers. Members, any concerns, questions? Councillor Green?
Are these housing revenue account properties at the moment? Thank you.
Is that it? Councillor Davis?
Regarding Park Lodge, it seems incredibly good value. Number 1, I take it, is the vacant unit that's referred to where it says they are vacant. And 2 and 3, are they leased currently or already let?
It's the freehold, so we're selling the freehold. So the
Yeah,
properties, yeah.
But, yeah, because it's £6,000 for the freehold, isn't it? So the rest of the 201 is for flat 1? Right, so effectively we've got 195 on that for a 3-bedroom. Okay, this doesn't have any bearing on the ongoing arrangements with the Italianate greenhouse around the other side of that block or anything. I know it's a separate site, but okay, so thanks.
Okay, so the recommendations are in the report there. Do we all agree with the recommendations? All agree? Thank you. Thanks, Ashley. Okay, moving on to item number 7, the adoption of the following new policies, decant policy and damp and mould and condensation policy. Call on Sally O'Sullivan to introduce the report.
Thank you. Right, today I'm bringing 2 new policies to OSP, a decant policy and a damp mould and condensation policy. The need for new policies can be identified in different ways. In this case, the driver for the damp mould and condensation policy is legislative, and for the decant policy is because we've identified a need within our service that would assist with consistent decision making. The requirement for the damp mould and condensation policy is due to AWAB's law, which was introduced in July 2023 as part of the Social Housing Regulation Act. AWAB's law prescribes strict timescales in response to reports of damp and mould, and we have based our policy on what the law tells us we must do, therefore providing clear guidelines for our officers, telling tenants what they can expect from our service, and ensuring we are operating within the legislation. The decant policy gives a framework for our officers to work by to ensure consistency is applied when faced with a situation where a tenant is needed to be decanted from their home. The policy describes the reason why a tenant might need to be decanted, what we will do in response, and if and under what circumstances compensation will be considered. Thank you.
Thanks, Sally. Members, any questions for Sally? Councillor Packman?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just on the policy for damp mould and condensation, it says here that if we fail to uphold or deliver what we should be doing with DMC, then they can take direct legal action through the courts of breach of contract. Do we need to have written in there that they need to go through our complaints process first?
Good point. Thank you. We'll add that in.
Thank you very much.
Councillor Wing?
Can I ask, do these policies also apply to TDC residents that are being housed by third-party providers, such as Orbit?
No, they only apply to the council's tenants as a landlord.
So tenants in our own properties?
Yes. In council-owned properties, sorry.
Anybody else? All happy. Excellent. So happy to send that forward to Cabinet? Excellent. Okay, thanks, Sally. All done. Short and sweet. Right, okay, moving on to item number 8, the local plan motion. I've got 2 members of the public who wish to speak, and I'm going to call on Mr. Solly first.
Thank you, Chairman and panel. This is not the first time I've spoken at the overview and scrutiny regarding the local plan, yet I'm here back again speaking on it in much the same manner. Many things have happened. We have adopted the local plan despite it being far from unanimous, with plenty and good and bad planning decisions. Sadly, as the report is not in the agenda pack and is to follow, I cannot have a view on what is said by officers. Certainly one thing I do question is the value of the local plan. Are we delivering the vision and the aspiration that it's set to do? I certainly question the delivery of the housing. As I say, it's unachievable. Has the numbers from the GL Hearn report support what's happened? The so-called OAN, which has set the delivery of 17,140 houses in the plan up to 2031, is yet to be realised. The housing delivery test says something different, which isn't great considering this is a relatively new plan. Has it delivered the much needed infrastructure, the MRM funding, the schools, the doctors, the other parts of infrastructure which is defined by the local plan? We've had clear rejections of allocated sites that don't deliver what is said in policy, especially affordable housing, and we are in a situation where we question the viability of sites despite the local plan being sound. What I am seeing is the mass destruction of our farming land and decisions to remove it from productive use in farming. It's rather ironic that thousands of farmers are protesting on the future of farming today, and we should all consider that. I'm sure you've heard that Thanet soils are the finest in the country and we should be offered the protection it deserves. The local plan builds predominantly on it. We also see many issues not being resolved, especially water supply and quality in our seas, and we're also threatened by green energy in our protected spaces for nature. I have yet seen a net value to nature and plant life. So since the local plan's inception to our consciousness and demands it places in many people's emotions, we should also look now to see if it's the best plan we have. I've long had the view it does not, and there is one question on what it also is there to do: protection. We're told constantly that we need a local plan because anything can happen and we have little power over it. I ask the same question with this particular local plan in place. What protection does it have? Is it delivering something we need? Is it detrimentally affecting our lives on this island? I am sure there are many people who live in Thanet who certainly think this is, and the council should be reminded that local view counts as democracy. Thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Solly. Thank you. And I call on Ms. Brown.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, panel. The local plan is no longer fit for purpose. Because housing targets have been missed by 4%, developers have the upper hand when it comes to applications for housing on our best and most versatile farmland. Houses that are not in this outdated plan. These rogue houses, for want of a better term, are going nowhere towards diminishing our housing targets, and are therefore our landscapes are being turned to concrete needlessly. Our top-grade farmland, which is the best in the South East, if not the UK, is being forfeited, all because this administration believes that they are right to keep running with this document. Food security in the UK has not been in such jeopardy since World War II. It is our time our council leaders woke up and smelt the disaster this plan is bringing onto the people of Thanet. I'd just like to say I've got my wellies on to support the farmers today as well.
Thanks, Ms Brown. I'll call on Ashley Jackson to present the report.
Thank you. The purpose of this report to overview and scrutiny is to provide advice to members in relation to a notice of motion regarding the local plan. The notice of motion to revoke the local plan 2020 is not supported, and the reasons for that are: the council has no legal power to revoke a local plan. The council would not meet the housing requirements generated through the application of the NPPF rather than the local plan. The council would be at a greater risk of planning by appeal and could also be at risk of government intervention, and important local plan policies would be lost and could not be used during the consideration of planning applications. To give a bit more context, which is included in the report to the council does not have the power to unilaterally rescind the existing local plan before preparing a new plan. There is power for the Secretary of State to revoke a local plan at the request of a local planning authority. It is understood that no such request has ever been made, and the Secretary of State has never exercised this power. In the unlikely event that the Secretary of State decided to revoke a local plan, the Council would have to rely on the NPPF and other government guidance in making decisions on planning applications. Not only would this entail the loss of sufficient housing land supply for the plan period, but it would also remove other local plan policies as well, relating to minimum internal space standards for new housing, water efficiency standards, national standards implemented through policy, affordable housing, green wedges, agricultural land, and support for social infrastructure and contributions to Birdwise. Thank you.
Thank you. Speaking under 20.1, I've got Councillor Pugh.
Thank you, Chair. Sorry that I wasn't here for the beginning of this. I thought that I had a little bit longer for a quick toilet break, so I do apologise. I hope I didn't miss anything. I don't want to rehash over a lot of what I said when I introduced this motion at full council previously. I don't think there's any point in that. All councillors, all 56, all 55 other councillors had to listen to me introduce it and the reasoning behind it. But I do want to touch on a few things. So the report that's in front of you tonight is asking that you would basically nip this in the bud now and not let it go any further. I don't agree with that. I don't think that's fair on residents. I don't think that's fair on all councillors. And I think at the very least you should refer this to Cabinet for Cabinet to decide. And I hope that Cabinet will do the right thing and refer it back to full council for a full debate, because I think it's important that all councillors in the chamber have an opportunity to debate the motion at hand. The motion that I put forward that was then accepted by the council was accepted in its entirety. So if there's anything within the motion that is outside the realms of the council or what we're allowed to do, it was accepted without any request for changes, amendments or anything like that. I'm not asking the council to do anything that is out of our powers. If the avenue to revoke the local plan is for us to write to the Secretary of State, then that's what I'm asking us to do. If it's never been done before, then fine, there's a first time for everything. If the Secretary of State has never exercised that right, if no one has ever written to them before, then of course they haven't exercised that right. But revoking the local plan and starting again provides an opportunity for us to really protect our agricultural land, to not only expand on the current green wedges that we have, because we don't have as many green wedges as many people believe, and many councillors at the time were led to believe. I was led to believe that the green wedges were effectively all of the gaps between many of our villages, when actually they're not. many of the gaps between our villages, such as between Monkton and Minster and Cliffs End and places like that, is that the land is now designated as outside the village confines, which actually in planning terms, as we see with developers or land promoters such as Gladman's, means very little, and we've got prospective developers still trying to develop on land that is outside those village confines. So within planning terms, it means relatively little, and it does not provide the protection that we need. But also it's an opportunity for us to start again and allocate for development sites in our town centres where we've got suitable infrastructure, we've got suitable services already, we're trying to push for more people and residents to not have cars, where better for residents to live, not only to support local businesses, but within our town centres, particularly as many of the large retailers are now leaving Ramsgate, Broadstairs and Margate. It's really important that we encourage people to live within the town centres. A quick search just of land that we as a council currently own, that is within town centres, that could be developed and could be put forward if we were to start again with a local plan, include Cavendish Street Car Park, Staffordshire Street Car Park, both in Ramsgate, Mill Lane Car Park up the road here, which I think all councillors will agree isn't a most well-used car park in the centre of Margate. Even these council chamber buildings, but also Leopold Street Car Park in Ramsgate as well. I'm not advocating that we get rid of parking in our town centres. That's not what I'm asking for. But what I think we'll all agree is that actually many of these sites stay vacant or they're underutilised, and that this is a better use for them. Because if we have more people living within our town centres, they're more likely to spend money in those town centres, they're more likely to support local businesses. And particularly as big retailers have moved out of town centres, that's really important. Because you'll have people like bakers and butchers and other artisan businesses coming back into our town centres. The modern boulangerie in Ramsgate closed. I say recently, but it may have been a couple of months ago. And one of the reasons for that at the time that they explained was a bad trading period in the summer and a fall in shortfall. If we have more people living within the town centres, they're there all year round and they're able to support businesses like that so that they have a viable future. We were constantly threatened with the local plan that we've now adopted at the time, when it was started under a Conservative administration and then finished under a Labour administration. We were threatened constantly with intervention from central government. Intervention never came. I've highlighted before when I introduced this motion that actually intervention never really comes, and that it's always a threat that is very rarely followed through with, and that there are districts or councils up and down the country that don't have local plans, either not in date or they've never had any. And I think that's really important to note. So I'm asking this council or this committee tonight to vote how you should vote and put this to Cabinet so that it can then be discussed and debated again. But more importantly, that you advise that it's important that it goes before full council so that all councillors can properly debate it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Pugh. Councillor Green first.
Could I first of all ask for some clarity? I understand this body is purely advisory. We don't make decisions. So all we can do, in fact, is advise Cabinet. Is that correct?
Well, yeah, I mean, I've got the minutes from, I mean, it's a bit gobbledygook as far as I'm concerned. It says that it has to go before overview and scrutiny, then on to Cabinet, because obviously this local plan is part of the policy framework, so it's the request for the local plan to be can only be put forward by Cabinet. So because it's a Cabinet decision, it goes from overview and scrutiny then to Cabinet. So we make recommendations in the same way. Is there any other key decision?
All right. The councillor says that he's not asking us to do something that's beyond the powers of the council. In other words, revoke the local plan. But in fact, the motion does ask us to do just that. Not only does it ask us to do that, but it also asks us to withdraw some of the planning allocations that are in the local plan also in another part of the motion, neither of which my understanding is that this council has the power to do. Is that correct?
Right. So the motion that was put forward had 4 elements to it. First was revoke the current local plan, which covers 2012 to 2032. Part 2 of it was to launch a consultation on a new local plan. Thirdly was to remove the current allocations, as you say, on Grade 1 agricultural land, and if necessary, try to reallocate it to poorer quality or brownfield sites, which Councillor Pugh was just talking about. And part 4 was to strive and support and bring investment to high streets and new local plan by allocating brownfield site and underutilised site within the town centres, as Councillor Pugh was just saying. So they're the 4 elements, and I understand what you're saying. It doesn't. I think, yeah, we can't revoke the local plan. I think in 3.4 of the report it says that there is the power of the Secretary of State to revoke it if requested by the authority. Yeah. So maybe that's the...
From my point of view, it's unfortunate that the motion does ask us to do 2 things that we haven't got the power to do, because in the other 2 clauses in the motion, I can see some merit in discussing them, particularly, obviously, using brownfield sites in the town where we can. But I think we're in an impossible position with this motion because it asks us to do things we can't do.
Councillor Scobie.
I mean, Councillor Green sort of made the technical point. I would like to come back in the debate, if possible, Chair, to make actual points on my views on the motion. But I just wanted to just clarify something. So I understand we're talking about this motion here, so nobody's trying to call it out of order. Excuse me. But Councillor Pugh mentioned that when he put the motion in, nobody challenged as to whether it was, it was something the council could do. Now we have a report from officers saying it's something that we can't do. Under the Constitution 3.8a, it specifically states that if a motion is asking to change a policy framework and hasn't already gone before Cabinet, it will be ruled out of order. But we're here talking about it. So I just wanted some clarity, even if this is just for the future process, as to how a motion that is asking us to do something that we can't do and specifically is against the motions that are allowed under the Constitution. We're here talking about it now. I don't fully understand the process.
I don't think anybody understands, but I think it was all flopped on us at full council that that this is in paragraph 3.8v of the Constitution, that the chair could rule it out of order. Obviously, we've got to make a recommendation to Cabinet now. That's the process. Do we accept the recommendation that's there and put that recommendation forward, or do we want to put other recommendations forward? That's up for us to decide now. But and we can have a vote on whatever recommendations anybody wants to put forward, and then we can put more than one recommendation forward, or we can just put one forward. I think Councillor Wing was next.
I mean, I think it's a shame that the motion wasn't debated, and I think every motion should be debated because somebody spent the time to put that motion in. So for somebody to say the next motion is more important is not right. I also believe, like many of us believe, and I think we all believe, that the local plan is not fit for purpose. But none of us are legal experts, and certainly if we'd have been allowed to debate that motion, then one of the adaptations I might have encouraged people to look at was do exactly the same as East Hants, and I think they've actually done that, which is seek the highest possible legal advice on challenging our local plan based on some key issues. So, and these are the key issues for me. It sets targets that simply cannot be achieved locally or nationally. I was really grateful for the members' briefing where it was explained that, nationally, that at the National Builders Conference, they've never been able to achieve any government targets on building numbers. So the government have not set smart targets. They've set us targets which we can't achieve, that very few councils can achieve. They're setting us up to fail. The housing landscape has drastically changed since the pandemic, and yet there's been no review by any government, the present one or the previous one, in trying to look at local plans and how the landscape's changed, particularly for coastal towns. We've had a massive influx of people, rents have gone through the roof, and the cost of our housing has increased. We're also a peninsula.
We're a peninsula, so East Hants' legal challenge was going to actually be based on the fact that they've got a national park. So I think it's 60%, it's either 50 or 60% of the land available to them, they can't build on because it's a national park. We're in a similar situation, we're a peninsula, so everything's being built on one side of the box. You know, we can't leave in a 360 direction, we haven't got facilities in a 360 direction, we're a little lozenge that's stuck out in the sea, which means that there's a multiple impact on traffic, lack of facilities, etc. It's not producing the type of housing we actually need, which is affordable in terms of rent and the houses people purchase. So, you know, we can sit here and we can all say we're asking the Cabinet or we're asking the Council to do something which we can't do, but we're not seeking the highest possible legal advice to find out whether we can do that. I think revoking the local plan would be problematic because we would have nothing to stop any developer coming to planning on a piece of land which presently sits outside the local plan and asking for a planning application, and that would have to move forward in a timely fashion. So, you know, I do believe that the local plan is not fit for purpose. I don't think many councils have got a local plan which is fit for purpose. So that begs the question. We need more councils to step up to the mark and start challenging whoever's in power. Thank you.
And they're all good points which, if we make a recommendation to take this back to debate, then you can make them. But, yeah, Councillor Davis.
I'd like to agree with everything Councillor Wings just said, particularly highlighting the peninsula element, because that's a very unique thing. We often get compared with the West Country, but, you know, the Cornish Peninsula is massive compared to us. We have already double the density of population of anywhere outside of London. We're surrounded by sea on three sides and best and most valuable farmland on the fourth. There is no more space. That's the matter of fact. Whether government like it, whether political parties like it, whether developers like it, banks, there is no more space. Therefore, we need special consideration. And the law and the government clearly make provision for that we can petition the Secretary of State to revoke the unsuitable local plan, and it's unsuitable for a number of reasons. But forgetting those and stop playing, you know, table tennis with who said what and did what, let's look at the reality and the here and now, which is this is not deliverable. We don't have a housing crisis in Thanet. You've only got to try and get from one side of the island to the other to see that. What we have is a crisis of greed and lack of affordability. Absolutely. Because there's no jobs on this island. If maybe our regeneration team paid more attention to actually producing jobs and employment, then the high streets would recover.
I think we need to stick to the motion.
I am, but
okay.
I'm saying, but the problem isn't housing. And building loads more houses is not going to affect the market in Thanet. It's very, very specific. What we need are jobs, people being employed, money in their pocket, then those houses become affordable. But at the moment, all we have a need for is increased temporary housing and social housing for the people that already live here. Because that's the other thing. Despite claims to the contrary, this community's population is static as good as, and has been for the last 2 decades plus. Even with the amount of incoming, it is static. Our death rate exceeds our birth rate, locally, if you like, and then you've got the population being topped up. There are no grounds whatsoever to give any credence to the AON. It's ludicrous in this community, and our job is to fight for this community, not to say, oh well, they haven't done it anywhere else. Let's set some standards. Let's make the difference, and let's be a council that speaks for its people. And just because Canterbury aren't doing it, I don't give a damn. We can do it. We should just be moving this motion through so that every one of the 56 members in this chamber get to speak on it, because it is that big an issue and that emotional that I think we have no right. We've just got to move this through And as Councillor Wing said, she wanted to see it debated. I think we all want to see it debated, because why would anyone not want to see this debated unless they're complicit with building on farmland?
Okay, thanks. Councillor Warren.
Yeah, thank you very much. I'd like to associate myself and my group with the statement that Councillor Rees made a few moments ago. I'd also like to I would also like to express my solidarity with our farmers today who protested in London. And I wish to pay tribute to farmer Jonathan Charlesworth, who took his life over the family farm tax.
Councillor Warren.
This is a bad policy and it needs to be ditched. I said what I needed to say. Thank you, Chair.
Nothing on the motion then, no?
I'll be voting the same as Councillor Davis.
Okay. Councillor Patman.
Thank you, Chair. I'm a bit confused, so forgive me. Whatever recommendation if we recommend it to Cabinet for whatever we recommend, it doesn't go to full council. It stays at Cabinet. Is that correct?
It's Cabinet's decision what happens next with it. We can make a recommendation to Cabinet that it goes back to full council debate, or we can make the recommendation that the officers don't support it. We can make any recommendation we like at this point, and we will come to recommendations after everyone's had their say, and then we can work out what we're going to do. Okay. Councillor Scobie.
Sorry, just to come back on. So thank you for clarifying that, because we're new, like, I don't really know the processes to this, to be honest. We do what we like. Don't tell me that. But I just want to pick up on a point that Councillor Davis made about regeneration. I think they are doing a good job. I've got to say that. I think they are doing a good job. So on that, but I get why residents are frustrated with the local plan. I think there's so much information out there, what we can do, what we can't do, people telling them we can do it, we can't do it, we can revoke the local plan, we can't revoke the local plan. There's so much misinformation. Social media has gone a bit bizarre. You just type in Thanet local plan on social media, and I think there's about 300 different things that we can do and about 300 different things we can't do, and it's all rubbish, if I'm honest. I do think it leaves our council open. But I do take what Councillor Pugh says, that there are councils across the country that doesn't have a local plan, so I do take that as a balanced argument. It was adopted by previous administrations, so people like myself, I don't really know the history, and new councillors that have been elected in, so I've had to do some reading about sort of what's gone on in the past. But I think the past is the past. I think we have to, as a council, look about moving forward and what is probably what we can do within our power, within our constitution. I think that's really important. And it's good to hear that the Leader of the Opposition is passionate about our town centres, because I think we all share the passion for town centres. I'm not necessarily a fan of filling them with residents, because that comes with its own challenges, as we're seeing in Margate High Street, for example. It is full of residents, but we can't attract new business, for example. So I think there's ways we can work together on that. But I think ultimately, I think we have to stick to what we're constituted to do, and I think we have to stick to what the legislation tells us. And I'm not an expert in the local plan, but I know the three people from housing and the kind of under Bob's team are. So I'm going to have to listen to the report.
Okay, Councillor Scobie.
Thank you, Chair. So first of all, I think the report that's on the agenda says that we have an up or down vote on this. We're not adding comments. We're being asked whether to recommend approval or rejection of the motion. Also, I think the suggestion that motions are not regulated by the Constitution is wrong. We had this discussion at Constitutional Review, and I think party leaders are going to take that away. But as it stands at the moment, a motion on a policy framework comes to overview and scrutiny for comment, or in this case, and by the report, acceptance or refusal, and then it goes to Cabinet for decision and doesn't actually go back to full council. So I think we need to be clear on the process there. Whether it's followed and whether that is the process. So let's not create grey area where there isn't. That's what it says in the Constitution. I want to sort of start by actually recognising the comments and the speech that Councillor Pugh actually gave at full council, which I have to admit I was getting ready for fire and brimstone, this is outrageous, and I actually thought the comments were quite fair. And I do agree with the sentiment that clearly things are happening with development here, which is not necessarily how everybody would want it. That's, there's no way that anyone can stand here and say we're completely going in the right direction. But for me, Councillor Packman is right, that it does have to be a line drawn. And when I look back at where these issues came from, in my opinion, it comes from lack of political leadership. And I don't mean that as anybody in particular, but from 2011 till 2023, there was no regular majority control of Thanet District Council. It bounced around, and you can see that even in the iterations of the local plan. And the cost to Thanet of that lack of political leadership and people looking for political change in UK Independence Party, the Thanet Independents, whatever they are, has actually led to drift, huge amounts of churn at officer level, huge amounts of money wasted and time lost on strategy documents that have gone back and forth. And that is where the root of this problem comes from. We can't change that. And that's where the problem comes, Chair, with this motion, is trying to change something that is a reality. Now, for better or worse, better in my opinion, probably worse for some of the people, we do have a majority on this council, and the local plan is being revised. There's a cabinet advisory group, and I think, I'm not on it, but I hear lots of very good work is going into that, and I think that political leadership is coming back cross-party. But what has happened has happened. You cannot put the genie back in the bottle. And I think the report, Chair, I think pretty much sets out clearly what we can and can't do. 3.4 does not have the power to revoke before preparing a new plan. And the motion itself doesn't actually make any reference to the Secretary of State. So that whole section around 3.5 and whether the Secretary of State could do it, we're not asking the Secretary of State today. We're talking about unilaterally doing it. So that whole point comes out. I mean, 3.8 in the report lists the impacts: loss of control over applications, our inability to set limits or expectations around affordable housing, even specific protections in the local plan being removed. I mean, I speak as somebody that's, since I got elected, been passionately trying to get changes at Jackie Baker's. Jackie Baker's is specifically protected in the local plan. It has its own section. You remove the local plan, what does that mean for the people trying to protect Jackie Baker's? Does that open it up? Honestly, I don't know. But at the moment, it's protected in the local plan. So unilateral removal has the potential actually to cause other issues. And you know, even looking at 3.12 in the report that says, even if we wanted to go to a new plan, the output of that is actually potentially going to be over 1,000 more houses added to the list. So talk about those car parks that we may want, that Councillor Pugh was talking about changing in Margate and Ramsgate. Those sites might be needed just for the 1,000 additional houses that we're projected we might need if we wrote a new local plan. So I think there's a number of points we need to pull out from that report. But I would summarise my opinion on this is that we cannot do it. What we've been asked for, even if it was going to the Secretary of State, cannot be done before. Even if it could, why hasn't somebody done it already? That speaks volumes for itself. We're not unique in terms of the situation we're in of wanting to protect our space. And I think the final thing is that even if we could do this, ironically, it would lead to exactly what people pushing this are saying they want to avoid, which is building on green spaces, agricultural land. In my opinion, following this motion would actually lead to the very thing that we collectively do want to stop but cannot because of that history of lack of political leadership in Thanet. So I will be voting whenever we get on to recommendation to say that we recommend to Cabinet that we don't approve this motion. Thank you, Chair.
That you don't approve the recommendation that's in the report? Or
Whichever way we go.
Okay, we come to that. Councillor Cupp.
Thank you, Chair. I think it's been really interesting listening to everyone's opinions and points of views so far. The one bugbear for me is that, and Councillor Scobie highlighted it earlier, is that I find it frustrating that we have a process in place where we can put forward a motion, and as far as I'm aware, and again with my somewhat little knowledge of being a councillor for 6 years, is that when a motion goes forward, if the council do not believe that they can legally undertake it or it's an action that they cannot do, the motion should fall there and then. The motion should be advised that it cannot happen, so as such, it should not be allowed to go to full council. That did not happen in this case. So surely the council, in effect, has taken a position on this to say that actually, because we've allowed that motion to come forward, as such, we've actually said that potentially we could revoke that local plan. So for me, I find that the council has potentially confused the situation unnecessarily and potentially accidentally as well, when it is a very emotive topic and something that should be debated by full council. And at the time that it was brought to full council, there were rightly the belief from Councillor Pugh that this could happen, because the monitoring officer did not state that there was no legal grounds for this not to happen, because at the time it was accepted as a full, proper motion. And I think that is something that we need to make sure that we are clear on going forward when other motions are submitted. But I would ask that this is reviewed properly, because I think we could be misguiding how potential future motions come forward. On the motion itself, I'm going to say it. I never supported this local plan. I voted against this local plan, and I still hold that view. I hear and I listen to everyone's opinions that without a local plan we don't have the protection. Without the local plan we could see developers build outside of the boundaries of the local plan. And I was having a conversation with a councillor in another authority who's told me that the best way they described their local plan was as if it was a force field where it protected against the developers coming in and building elsewhere. But I don't believe that is actually happening in Thanet, and I don't believe that actually the local plan is protecting the way that it states. And also I don't believe the local plan is this amazing bit of legislation that protects us, that allows us to ensure we get affordable housing, that protects our agricultural land, because we are seeing our agricultural land being built over. When big developments come forward, we are not seeing the affordability of our houses met at 30%. We have to lower it because it is not viable to do so. So, again, something that I don't understand is if our local plan is this powerful legislation piece, how is it that so many of these planning applications that come through don't hold up to what our local plan states? And again, that is why I think that our local plan is not fit for purpose. I would like to agree with Councillor Wing that there are other authorities that are looking at higher legal advice, and I think that's something that we should potentially look at. And I think we need to remember with this motion that it was voted on at full council by all councillors present to be debated. And I'm sorry if I'm speaking too early, Chair, but I would like to now state that I would like to put a recommendation forward that we recommend to Cabinet that they put this back to full council to ensure that there is a full debate that can be undertaken. And because it is important, again, as Councillor Wing said, that amendments can be brought forward on this. And actually, I would like to state that if this advice had been given to Councillor Pugh before this motion was submitted, I can guarantee you this motion would be different in its wording to ensure that it was, as we're seeing now, potentially legally sound. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Cupp. So that recommendation, we'll come back to them, but just the recommendation to Cabinet that the motion goes forward to full council for a full debate as per the vote.
Point of order, Chair. He needs
Sure.
to second it, and then we need to debate that.
No, I'm just writing it down.
It doesn't, I just want to say...
No, it's not being voted on now. I'm just writing it down.
But like point of procedure, Chair, you don't...
I'm not asking for seconders.
Well, I'm just saying that's not how the Constitution works. You have to vote on each individual one. So, for example, there may be elements of that I support, but if people layer it and then it's put as a group, it makes it very difficult for people to support or reject. So I think it needs to be taken in turn, Chair.
Okay, so we've got that recommendation. The recommendation is that it goes back to Cabinet with the recommendation that the motion goes back to full council for full debate as per the vote. Okay. I have a second. Did you say seconded by Councillor?
For me, there's two issues here. One issue is the local plan, which I do not believe is fit for purpose, but I do understand there could be legal consequences. We're all saying could be legal consequences. None of us knows, because there isn't a legal person in this room that can tell us what those legal consequences are, which is my adaptation to that would be let's seek the highest possible legal advice. But equally important to me is the right to debate, which was taken away from us.
Well, I think that comes into the recommendation that you just seconded. Do you want to make a recommendation about legal advice as well?
We sit here and people, I think what we're talking about is the possible consequences if we revoke the local plan. And I think we all know there will be some, but none of us know what they are because none of us are legal experts. So one of my recommendations would be that we do exactly the same as East Hants and we seek the highest possible national legal advice on our position. And we also write to the present government to say the local plan's not fit for purpose.
Are you just making a comment, or are you...
I'm not as good at the Constitution as other people who are, and, you know, make their points very fairly. I would like to make an amendment if the proposer is agreeable. And my amendment would be to seek the highest possible legal advice on challenging our local plan. Yeah, because we keep talking about it's not legal, but none of us know whether it's legal or not legal.
The recommendation is that it goes to Cabinet for full debate and to seek legal advice, the best legal advice we can. Is that what you said? The highest possible. So have I got a seconder for that? And you're happy to be amended? Yeah. Okay, Councillor Scobie, you're going to want to come in on that?
Yeah, I mean, the procedure on this is all over the place.
I'm just trying to...
I get that, because the way the report's written, as I understand it, is this is not like normally how we comment on things on scrutiny. It's asking us to, if we agree or not with the motion. It's treated completely differently. So I don't think we're adding comments, and even if we were, this wouldn't be how you'd do it. I just wanted to, just while we're there, just clarify something with Councillor Wing, just to make sure we're on the same page. I think the motion that you're referring to that didn't get debated was Councillor Fellowes' one on the winter fuel, where I proposed a closure motion, not this motion, because this one got referred directly without debate. I think Councillor Pugh introduced it, I think Councillor Everett responded, and it came straight here. So just wanted clarity, because you said that a couple of times, where we're talking about the same motion.
Whatever way it happened, we still, some of us had our right to debate taken from us. It took two different routes on two different motions, and I believe, and I know my group believes, that even if we disagree with a debate or a motion, we should have that debate. It says here, you know, debates encourage participants to consider multiple perspectives and think strategically. Yeah. So talking is just as important as listening to people. Yeah. You know, and there are some things I don't like to hear when we debate, but you should still listen to them.
Yeah, I don't disagree. I was just saying there was no closure motion on this motion. That was the other one, is what I'm saying.
OSP should be really sticking to whether we say, do we agree with this or don't we agree with
so
this?
So the recommendation in front of us is either we can take that recommendation and accept it or reject it and then make comments. We can't make other recommendations. Yes.
I was going to say that maybe we have to leave it as it is, because to change it and simply recommend that, or to highlight the fact that amendments can be made, but only obviously at the time of debate, because otherwise we're debating amendments that we've got no right to implement. But if we make a recommendation that they can be debated, because I agree with Councillor Scobie on his point about whether we have the right to revoke the plan. We clearly as an authority don't, but the Secretary of State does. So a revision to point 1 in the motion would simply overcome that. But that should be agreed by all concerned, not at this platform, or indeed by Cabinet, but by the full Council, because I do believe this has to be a full Council vote. Otherwise, people who voted to debate this, as Councillor Wing has highlighted, will not be given their democratic right. So I don't think there's any option here other than to pass this through with the recommendation that Cabinet refer it to full council, but highlighting the fact that it may need revision in order to be fully compliant.
Okay, I'll come back to that in a minute.
Excuse
Councillor
my husky voice, by the way, while I'm growling at you.
Councillor Huxley.
Thanks, Chair. Can we have some advice from Joseph Katenga? He's a lawyer, isn't he? And also from Adrian Verrill, because there's no leadership in this. Well, we're sort of floundering around here. As far as I understand, a recommendation will go back to Cabinet, and then they have to decide what happens next. Thanks.
The Chair has clarified the current position. What the report is asking us to do is simply to recommend whether we are in line with the legislation, which is to either to not support or to support. The rest can be comments, but at the moment it's simply do we recommend to support or not to support in line with the legislation which has been read out at the very moment. Thank you.
Councillor Scobie.
Well, Chair, on the basis of that advice then, and just to move it along,
Yeah,
to have the
we'll have
vote
a vote.
on, I would like to move that, as per the officer recommendation, that we do not seek to revoke the local plan. And then I assume we will then go into discussion of comments that we want to add.
So the recommendation is that the notice of motion to revoke the local plan is not supported, and that's not supported by officers, not by us, it's by officers. So who agrees with the officer report?
Yeah. And I'm proposing that we agree.
You
that
agree with the
we
officer's
edit, yes.
recommendation?
Correct, Chair.
Okay, and do we all agree with that? Right, okay, we need to have a vote then, don't we? Councillor Green. So are you proposing that we reject the officer's recommendation? You, okay. Councillor Davis.
I'd like to remind this committee that, again, as Councillor Wing highlighted, full council voted to debate this and have been denied the right to do so. If this committee refuses to move this forward or gives a negative recommendation, I think it has implications.
Now we can make the comments on it. Let's just stick to this so we can get this right. So who agrees with the officer's recommendation that this motion is not supported?
We're not going to vote yet, are we?
I think Councillor Scobie's asked for the vote and it was seconded.
You didn't ask to go to the vote. No, so we can have a debate about. So Councillor Scobie has recommended that, as per the recommendation in the report, that this panel would move it forward to the next stage, go to Cabinet, but not support it. That's been seconded by Councillor Huxley, and now we should be having a debate about whether we agree with that or whether we don't agree with that. And at the end of that, then we have a vote. Okay. That's it. We don't want to do the vote now because otherwise then nobody will be able to have a debate about it.
Councillor Packman.
So for me, we're being asked to vote on something that we can't do. So I'm taking the legal advice and the officer's advice here because I'm not an expert here. And just like Councillor Davis and some of the fellow councillors in the room did around the PSPO to protect the council from any legal challenge or any costs of it, I think we have to do the same approach. I think we have to be sensible here, and we can't be doing something that we can't. It says here, reason for recommendation, the council has no legal power. So we legally can't do this. So why are we still sitting here talking about this motion? Because I'd rather be talking about things that we can really make changes on. You know, like youth provision, like we heard from Councillor Keane earlier, and other things and whatever. So for me, I'm no expert in this, so I've got to take the legal advice and the officer's advice. Unless a lawyer tells me we can do this, then
I think that goes back to what Councillor Wing was saying about they take it back to debate so it can be amended correctly, so it says that ask the Secretary of State to revoke it.
But we're not debating it. We're asking if we want the officer's decision or not.
I get what you're saying, but I think that goes back to her point. Yeah. Councillor Cupp.
Thank you, Chair. So just to quickly pick up on the point of Councillor Patman, I would argue that the reason that we want this to go back to full council is so that amendments can be made so that it is legally sound. But the question that I wanted to ask is that, so if we do not support this recommendation, because earlier on I heard that we can only make comments on this, but if we don't support this recommendation, are we not entitled then to put a recommendation forward that we do support? Just to come back on that point. Sorry, Councillor. So how does this group, this committee, sorry, have the power to reject a recommendation, but then not have the power to put a recommendation forward that we all agree on as a committee?
There is no rejection and there is no approval. It's simply a recommendation not to support or to support.
Councillor Davis.
Which concerns me, because as Cabinet's critical friend, a majority vote on this committee against says that we support it, and I don't think that's quite the case. It's not the case, because as Councillor Green has said, there's plenty of space for debate. I think we need to, in all good conscience, move this forward and allow that debate to take place during the debate of the motion. Then if the motion fell, it falls on the basis of a full democratic debate with 56 members, not the opinion of politically biased committees which are proportionate with the representation in the chamber. We need to let the chamber speak for the people rather than assuming that mantle. And it's as simple as that. It was voted for in this chamber to be debated. To disallow that, I think we're overstepping the mark and empowering ourselves for things that we can't do.
Yeah, I think. I mean, I wrote down here what Councillor Pugh said about the democracy of full councils. That should override. Does it override this committee? Yeah. Councillor Scobie.
That has to be the overriding principle here.
God, I love a procedural mess. Love a procedural mess. I think we need to clear up some things here. Constitution states, if it's to do with a policy framework, even though I argue and agree with sort of Councillor Cupp that the decision to actually allow the motion was a little bit of a confused one, but the decision maker here is Cabinet, not Council, Cabinet. So this motion has been referred to us as the critical friend, the scrutineer of Cabinet for comment before the decision maker, Cabinet makes a decision. That's where it stops under the current Constitution. Now, CRC is considering changing that process because we recognise there are flaws in that, and the party leaders have agreed to take that away and bring that back to a future meeting to try and clear up this process. But as it stands, that is how it works. And to be clear, at the last full council meeting, I don't think that there was a debate to a vote to debate this. It was referred directly to Cabinet as the decision maker. So there is no removal of democracy. We've just got to be really, really clear on this. The Constitution states that if there's something to do with policy framework, it goes to Cabinet without discussion, which it has done. This should never go back to full council because it's a motion on a policy framework. So that's the first thing, and the clarity there. So that is why we are being asked, as our legal officer has stated, we are being asked whether we agree with the officer recommendation or the thrust of the motion or not, and why we're not adding additional comment, because we're not the decision maker here. So I just think that hopefully should clear things up, and the debate we're having now is, do we agree with the officer recommendations or not? I have moved, Councillor Huxley has seconded, and obviously that's where the debate needs to be focused now.
As far as I remember, it was moved and seconded, and it was unanimously voted to debate, and then it was stopped. That's how I remember it. And it does say in the here that the Cabinet can recommend it go back to full council for consideration.
It was so confusing that I don't think any of us knew what was going on, which we do need to address that, because that's not helpful for the general public either. This is the single most important issue that our residents have, apart from waste, I think. And I think it is really important that it goes back to Cabinet, and Cabinet recognises that fact, and Cabinet then allows a debate to happen, where I think most of the 56 will realise perhaps we don't have the legal power to do what we should be doing, although I'd like to ask, what legal advice have we taken to tell us that we don't have the legal power to revoke the local plan? So that's the first thing I'd like to ask. But, you know, we do need to seek the highest possible legal advice on whether we can revoke and whether we can challenge. And that would be an adaptation to the motion if it had been debated on that evening. Because we're all talking about something about which we don't know enough about. What legal advice have we taken to say it's illegal to do that?
Yeah, I'd just like to say that the senior litigation lawyer has explained to us what we can do and can't do with this recommendation, and I think we should respect the decision of the senior litigation lawyer.
Just to answer that question, the Town and Country Planning Act 1990 is pretty clear on the council's position, and the panel is also reminded to stick to the Local Government 2000 Act in terms of its current functions, which is to either to scrutinise, to recommend, based on what has been reported. So it's best we stick to that function. Thank you.
Let's bring Bob in.
Well, I was just briefly going to say that the advice from the Council's Head of Democracy and Legal and Monitoring Officers in the report, and her advice is quite clear that we don't have the power.
Councillor Cupp.
Just on a procedural matter, so as it's to do with policy and it's come to overview and scrutiny, why was it that when Councillor Garner's motion came forward to pause the local plan about a policy matter, were we allowed to debate that at full council, but this one, it has to be brought to overview and scrutiny?
I'm not sure anybody here could answer that, to be honest. Councillor Davis?
To add to that, I'd probably guarantee that they couldn't, because nothing's changed, because otherwise we would know, being on that constitutional review committee. And it's a very good question. In fact, my hand had been up for the same thing. We haven't had a vast number of motions under notice in this chamber in the recent months. But I clearly remember Councillor Garner's motion. There have been several that we've gone straight to debate. So the fact that this was referred back to officers for a report because of the complexity of the situation, not to see if it was viable. The fact that it's been accepted as a valid motion says that it should be debated. And again, we can sit here with a lot of rhetoric about the ins and outs and what might and might not be happening and so on, but it was certainly referred for a report, but on the basis it would come back for full debate. We are part of a process, granted, that in order to do that, it then needed to come to Cabinet for them to recommend it to full council, and if it goes to Cabinet, it should come through here, which is why we're here now. But at the end of the day, with their observation should be that it needs probably tweaking in order to be fully effective, but that it should be debated by full council.
So Bright.
Yeah, thank you. I agree with everything that Jack Patman said, because I am obviously new as well. We're not in this position because of me. My hands are tied. I'm having to deal with what we've got. I'm not happy about it either. But the bottom line is we have no legal power to revoke a local plan. So what exactly are we going to debate, whether we agree with that or not? But we have no legal power. We're being told that. So how can we debate that? That's what kind of amendments? What do you mean?
So you could bring an amendment forward that states that the motion seeks for the leader to write to the Secretary of State to revoke the local plan. So you're essentially then voting that you would then vote on that amendment for whether or not the council support the leader writing to the Secretary of State to revoke the local plan. And that's why the motions are important to go to debate, because as Councillor Wing stated, amendments can be brought forward, voted for or voted down.
But in the report it says it details the risks of doing that. Does that not worry you? The risks
totally agree that
of we would lose our neighbourhood plans. We would lose. I just think the amount of money that we could potentially lose as a council, I think, is so irresponsible. We've agreed a local plan, which I don't agree with, but this is the local plan that we've got. It's not good, but we've got it. We've been told, and yet we've got people, I'm astounded actually, that are willing to risk our reputation, are willing to risk the money that I don't think it's very funny, Councillor Worrow. We're in a... I wasn't laughing, Councillor. It sounded like you were.
Calm down. Well, it wasn't. Councillor Bright.
I just think it's completely irresponsible. I don't like being in this position. It's really horrible. And I hate the fact that there's probably going to be a newspaper article that is going to name and shame people because we're being told we've literally got our hands tied. That isn't why I stood to be a councillor. I stood to be a councillor to help my community, which I feel like I'm doing very, very well. I also follow the law, and the law says we don't have the power to revoke this local plan. So what's the point of debating it?
Councillor Patman.
Yeah, and just to follow on from Councillor Bright, I think this is what's got the council in trouble in previous years, because we've tried to do things that we're not legally or should be doing. And, you know, if you look at previous administrations and chief execs and whatever, they've done stuff that isn't legal, isn't right, isn't morally right. And I'm not prepared to put the council in that position again after the work that has been done by the previous administration and this administration, you know, to bring in someone like Colin and get us on the straight and narrow, to put us in a position that could put us in a difficult position. And I echo what Councillor Bright says. You know, previous administrations, lack of leadership has put us, as the new administrator, in a really difficult position.
Councillor Coe.
Also, the reason probably the Secretary of State has never revoked a local plan, never been asked, but the problem, the reason that they haven't done this is probably the deluge of litigation from landowners, developers whose sites have already been allocated. There would be an avalanche of litigation, and that's why that would never carry any weight.
I think we're starting to make assumptions on people's reactions to that, with all due respect, Councillor Curry. Bottom line is, we represent the people. We represent the people that do not want 17,000 unnecessary properties on this island. Our job is to do that. And consequently, our job is to explore ways of achieving the public aim. And what I don't understand, Councillor Bright, is why you don't understand that it clearly states in the law that the Secretary of State has the right to revoke the local plan. Therefore, we petition him as a council to revoke the local plan. Then the grounds for that can be debated with somebody with the authority. So we're not debating whether we revoke it. We've said we don't have that right, but the Secretary of State does, and it should be our right on behalf of our residents to petition him to at least review it.
Councillor Scobie and Councillor Green.
I was going to offer to sum up, Chair, on my motion. But do you want Councillor Green to go first?
We also represent many thousands of people that haven't got a home to live in, Councillor. We seem to be proposing that we put forward a motion, the two major planks of which are that we revoke the local plan and that we negate planning permissions that have already been agreed, neither of which we can legally do. And that we can amend this motion so that we take those things out, the two major things that are in the motion. I don't think those amendments are valid because they negate the motion.
Okay, do you want to sum up on your recommendation? On your...
Yeah, my motion that we accept the officer recommendation. Yeah, I actually have a lot of sympathy for Councillor Pugh in this, because I think the point that Councillor Cupp made earlier, which is that when the original motion was put forward, if he had received feedback that it wasn't actually valid, then the motion before us would be very different. It would be asking the Secretary of State to revoke it, not asking us to unilaterally revoke it. That did not happen, which means that now we're in this situation where a motion that should never have been accepted in the first place is now before us for rejection because it should never have been put there in the first place. That's the conundrum we find ourselves in on that one. And I'm very sorry that means that because it does not specifically state that we are asking the Secretary of State, it does not mention that, it has to be rejected. Now that does not mean that the argument that Councillor Cupp and others have made that we should be writing to the Secretary of State should not come back to Council. It's a perfectly reasonable thing to ask. It's never been done before for the reasons Councillor Curry talked about, but that is something valid that we could do. This motion is not. Therefore, I think the only thing that we can do here is to recommend to Cabinet that we reject the motion and that we agree with the officer recommendation, because we are not being asked to recommend to Cabinet that the local plan be referred to the Secretary of State for rejection. We're being asked to refer to Cabinet for it to be unilaterally rejected, and that is not legal. Thank you, Chair.
We're asked to agree with the officer's recommendation that they don't support the motion, not us. It's the officers. So it's those people making the recommendation, not us. Did anybody, Councillor Ring?
Say, it smacks of similar to the PSPO, where obviously we were in a difficult situation because legal action was going to be thrown at us, and we just sent it back to Cabinet to make those amendments. Now, you know, we do have a sensible Cabinet. So, you know, why, if and I do want the motion to be debated, even if the motion is wrong. A lot of motions are wrong. The Gaza one was wrong according to both parties, and you made amendments, and we voted on that, and it went through. I just see this as being exactly the same. You know, we had no legal powers to stop any bombs being sent anywhere in the world, but you know, the motion was debated, it was amended twice, and a motion was then voted on. So surely if we send this back to Cabinet, because we do have we do have a Cabinet, and we do have we do have a party that's got overall control, so they haven't got to rely on anybody else to side with to get things through. Surely then the Cabinet can make some of the recommendations that they maybe will have been listening to here. But I do think it is important for that motion to be debated. If it's only for this reason, too many residents think TDC are to blame for the local plan. Yes. They keep saying housing numbers, TDC, the planning department's this, the planning department's that. We're not responsible for the housing numbers. The previous government were responsible for our housing numbers. And if that's the one message that comes out of a debate that sends that to residents, that actually it's not officers that are in control of numbers, it's not even councillors that are in control of numbers, it was the government.
Just like to reiterate that, irrespective of administration, you know, if the algorithm is wrong, it's wrong. I'd also like to point out, however, Councillor Scobie is saying that he considers this shouldn't have been heard as a motion and is flawed. I'd like to point out that the person that approved it is the same person that has then in the report saying that they don't support it. So if he trusts her opinion on one thing, maybe he ought to trust it on the second and vote with us to approve this.
Okay, so Councillor Scobie has proposed that we accept the officer's recommendation, that this motion is not supported, and it was seconded by Councillor Huxley. So I need to get a show of hands who agrees with Councillor Scobie. No, I won't have recorded. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 8, yeah. Yeah. And against that? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and me. 7. Okay, so this committee, this panel, agrees with that recommendation. Do we want to make any comments following that? Are we allowed? Would you mind? So we can make comments.
The only comment that I would make is that I would like to see this come back to full council for a full debate. That's the only comment that I would like to make.
Yeah, so similar to what we said earlier, that you'd like this motion to go back to full council for debate. That's a comment that you'd like to make. And Councillor.
I'd like to encourage the person that proposed the motion to go away and think about what's been said in this room, particularly around seeking the highest possible legal advice on ways in which we can particularly challenge the housing numbers.
I accept the homework that you've given me, Councillor Wing. Thank you.
Any other comments we'd like to make?
Or can I just make the point that I don't agree with that comment? Not because I don't think that this should go to necessarily, this as a topic should go to full council, but I think for the point that this motion cannot be approved, we don't have the power, just putting it from cabinet to full council means we're going to have this exact same discussion again, discussing legalities. If we want to have the debate at full council, then it needs to be on the basis of a motion that says write to the Secretary of State to revoke it, because then that's something we actually can do. That's not what's in front of us. I do not support it going to council, because it's just going to cause another one of these meetings. And I love a meeting. I love procedure. Even I'm finding this slightly tedious. So,
I mean, everybody has the opportunity to go next week to Cabinet and put the case forward to Cabinet members themselves, you know. I mean, the way I feel about it, 56 people voted to debate it. It's now come to 15 people who, now we've said we don't want to debate it, and then it's going to go to 5 people who, I don't know what they're going to do. So, okay, so are we done, yeah? Okay. So we want to make those comments? I mean, I need to... yeah, you happy with making those comments, that Councillor Cupp? Yeah, I've got them here.
are we going to vote on those, Chair? No, seriously, are we going to vote on them?
Okay, so Councillor Cupp said that he'd like the motion to go back to full council for full debate as per the vote at full council. Does everyone agree to that? Right. So nobody, how many people would like to, Councillor Cupp's comment to go forward? They'd like it to go back to full council for debate.
No, it's just a comment that's in the bin. I've just commented on my own. Just read that out, yeah. It's not
So you want to put down it as a named comment? Would you like it as a named comment? Okay, and your named comment as well. Okay, that's you happy with that? Okay. It's a minefield for all of us. I mean, this is not something we're going to come across every month. Okay, can we all take a break from that now? Okay, moving on to item number 9, the External Grant Funding Scrutiny Review Report. Councillor Austin, would you like to present?
Thank you, Chair. I will try and be brief, as the last item has taken a long time. I'm hoping that everybody has read the report and the officer comments that accompany it. I'd like to say thank you to the Working Party members who helped write it, to officers who contributed their time, particularly to Charles, who has supported us throughout, and to all the voluntary sector organisations that contributed. Our remit, as we started off, was to look at bringing in external grant funding, small amounts of grant funding, and how we could support the voluntary sector to do that. Inevitably, that remit stretched a bit, so we got into the territory of how we can improve the council's relationship with the voluntary sector in order to help them be more financially secure and help them bring in more money. We have recognised that in our report, and officers have recommended that in their covering note. But we do think that all our recommendations actually will support the bringing in of funding, as well as the general stability of the voluntary sector in Thanet. Obviously, the voluntary sector is very, very varied. It runs from, 2 people and a dog volunteers to branches of large national organisations, and the level of professionalism and skill and knowledge that those organisations have also varies. So we have a huge amount of relevant knowledge and skill in our voluntary sector. We also have voluntary sector groups that might be quite new or quite inexpert at, for example, bringing in funding, who need support. And the work that's happening through the UK Shared Prosperity Fund in particular to link those organisations with infrastructure bodies that can help is particularly welcome. So we've given some examples of good and bad things that have happened in the council's relationship with the voluntary sector. We heard some horror stories, I have to admit. But we also heard some huge praise, particularly for the work that's going on now through the Shared Prosperity Fund and the Margate Town deal, and to the support that organisations are now getting, the way that they feel that they're coherent, that they've been brought together as groups, that they're learning from each other, etc. So our recommendations really follow on that. And one of the things that particularly struck us was that our recommendations and the feedback that we got was very similar to the feedback that happened through the Town and Parish Council's working party, a lot of the same comments. So that suggests to us that if we can improve our practice as a council, improve our communication, improve our transparency, give a helping hand to our voluntary groups, and to take that approach more generally, that's going to help us working with the voluntary sector, it's going to help us working with the town and parish councils, it's going to help us working with local businesses and generally across there. So our recommendations, we believe, are going to be helpful to the voluntary sector if they're approved, but they're also going to help us to be a better council. And we think that's really crucially important. Our recommendations are mostly very cheap. The recommendations all were things that the majority of our respondents supported, so we didn't put something in because one random person said it was a good idea if nobody else supported that. And we are particularly grateful to the senior officers and Charles who put in the covering report, because generally it supports what we are recommending. So I commend the report to you and thank you very much for giving us the opportunity to work on it.
Thank you, Councillor Austin. Yeah, it's a fantastic report. I mean, as all our scrutiny reviews have been in the last couple of years. I mean, it's quite comprehensive, quite a long one. And I'll congratulate you for getting over the line, because I know it's been quite difficult. Members, anybody would like to make a comment for Councillor Austin? Yes, Councillor Davis.
Just to say it was a privilege to work on the project. I think we learnt a lot. One of the great things that's come out of it for me is the universal commitment from on all sides that worked on this to continue the work and to continue the outreach. That's already yielded good relationships and some initiatives that are probably not worth mentioning here, but just in terms of day-to-day protocols and things, there's lots of good coming out of this. So I'd just like to say it's good to see some outcome, and congratulate Councillor Austin, because she chaired it great, as all those of us that were on it knew. So thank you.
Councillor Scobie?
Sorry for Brown.
That's fine.
I was going to say, I have to start by saying I went into this working party sceptical as to what would be achieved, and I am happy to say I was completely wrong. And I think the output is not just positive in the sense of some really good recommendations, and I think excellently chaired by Councillor Austin, but what I really liked, and I don't know if this is a case in previous scrutiny working parties, but is the amount of engagement from officers in terms of saying, quite frankly, what recommendations can and can't be done, what's in plans, what's in the future, and what could be achieved. I think that clarity has really added value, and I think that it's been a really, really positive process. So, as I said, it's nice to sometimes to admit that you were completely wrong, and I was on this one.
Yeah, I think as the setting up of forums as well. You know, I think it's like, say, communication. Same with the town and parish council with the forum. They're bringing people together, bringing like a place where people can share ideas and find out and information which is generally quite hard to find. And I think that should be congratulated. Councillor Wing.
I'm sure you won't be able to answer this question, but have we got any idea of the monetary equivalent value of our voluntary sector service?
I don't know, but Nicola Wood might well know.
Surely it's a difficult figure to put on, especially when people are litter picking and planting plants and guerrilla gardeners and things like that. Anybody else like to make a comment? Okay, excellent. I'm sure everyone agrees that we take it to Cabinet. Okay, we've still got one outstanding. I'm not sure if that's at Cabinet next week. Is it the tourism one?
Yeah.
That's at Cabinet next week?
I'll need to check. Sorry, Chair.
I've got that one here as well. I mean, we're still looking at that one from back then. Yeah, I've got them all. But I think the tourism one, I think that's still outstanding. I think we were promised in the third quarter. We're well into the third quarter.
Tomorrow.
Yeah. We don't want to talk about tourism taxes too much. Okay, moving on to item number 10, which is the forward plan, exempt Cabinet reports list.
She can come back if she wants. Councillor.
Where's she gone?
She had to leave. She's
Oh.
totally interested.
I didn't think that would matter with the... Okay. Did she exclude herself?
She excluded. She probably doesn't have any comment on the floor plan.
I mean, one thing I will say, we make difficult decisions here. We've had a lot of talk on that local plan. Please don't mention names in any. I don't think it's right to name people who voted for and against things. I think that's. I think if we keep it within this room who voted what. Okay, moving on. Item 10, the forward plan and exec cabinet lists. Unless there's something from the plan that the panel wish to consider, then members are asked to note the report. Okay, that concludes tonight's business. I thank everyone for coming. Thank you to officers, members of the public. See you next month.